the badge behind me. We've got Jamie Seahorn, analyst for the First District online to help with the online audience. And then we've got a few people here as well. So I've got a few slides for you tonight just to talk to you about what's going on here in Live Oak proper. And then there should be plenty of time for questions afterwards. We can get into anything that you guys want to talk about. Again, I host these meetings just about every month and try to rotate them throughout the First District so that every neighborhood gets an opportunity to have a little bit of focus and really dive into some of the issues happening. So you can see here with the various dots, some of the things I'll talk about. Highway 1, East Cliff resurfacing, the rail trail, the housing element, Kaiser, the Live Oak School District and their housing plans, and then CSA 9E, which is the landscaping for our street trees and medians in the Live Oak SoCal area. So let's jump in. Yesterday, we broke ground on the highway project, starting right out here. I've got an office here and watched the cars crawl by every day. So we had folks from the state, Caltrans, the California Transportation Commission, and this is what we're building. This is a bike and pedestrian bridge that will, again, start pretty much right out here and cross over to Chanticleer, to Gray Bears, and the SPCA on the other side of the street. You can see it's got a humpback whale theme there on the bridge, and there's a little person taking a jog. Of course, that's just part of the whole project. As you can see, we're also adding this auxiliary lane to the highway. So you'll be able to get on at the SoCal Drive exit, stay in that lane all the way to 41st when it'll exit. The bus will be able to keep going. So it's called a auxiliary lane / bus on shoulder project, because the idea is the bus will run in that lane. And then between the exit and the next entry point, it'll just be a bus only zone. And that'll help give the bus a little bit of boost, a little bit of priority. And we're looking at the metro routes now to try to put more of the buses on the routes that are in the most demand, get more frequency, and really move as many people as possible with our existing metro system. This is the first of 3 phases for this project. So as I mentioned, this goes from SoCal Drive exit to the 41st exit, then phase 2, which will break ground here probably just in sometime in the next 6 months, 41st to State Park Drive. And then phase 3 is from State Park Drive to Freedom Boulevard, where of course the highway opens up to 3 lanes in both directions again. This project will be happening on both the north and south side of the highway. And as you can see with each one of these little black marks, those are the bike and pedestrian crossings that you can see in each segment. So the Chanticleer bridge I mentioned, this is Capitola Avenue, which is going to be replaced with a larger bridge and wider bike and pedestrian lanes. And then the new crossing at Miramonte Drive over by the old putting green there in Aptos. And then in phase 3, there's 2 portions of the rail trail bridges there, old rail bridges that would be improved for bike and pedestrian access as well. Phase 2 is fully funded. Like I said, it's going to break ground soon. And then phase 3, the environmental impact report will be, I think we're having a sneak peek here at the beginning of May. And we received a $30 million federal mega grant for one of only 9 projects in the whole country. So just goes to show you that this project is attracting great attention really because of the multimodal approach. But we're not just widening the highway for cars, we're also looking at ways to optimize the movement of the bus as well as circulation for bikes and pedestrians. And actually, we're not even just looking at the highway, we're also looking at SoCal Drive in conjunction with it. So this summer, we're going to start work on the SoCal Drive congestion and buffered bike lane mitigation project. Congestion mitigation and buffered bike lane project. Mix that title up a little bit there. But this will also be helping cars, buses, and bikes and pedestrians. There will be 22 new smart lights put in, which basically means the lights will now talk to each other. You'll get those wave of greens so that when you go, you should have green, all the way through the central part of the county here. So this project will go from La Fonda by Harbor High all the way to State Park Drive. So yeah, 5 miles. There'll be, like I said, those 22 new smart lights. and then green bike lanes throughout the majority of it. So either buffered, which means there's the bike lane and then an extra foot or two of striping, or fully protected where there's a bollard that actually prevents the cars from entering the bike lane completely. So again, 5 miles in both directions of those bike lanes, and also a lot of improvements for pedestrians, 96 crosswalk upgrades, and 10 of those mid-block rapid flashing beacons that you hit and are highly visible, so cars actually stop. And that should be breaking ground this summer. And then phase 3, just to go back a slide here, of this highway project will also include upgrades for Soquel Drive for the remainder all the way to Freedom Boulevard. All right, and then touching on other road construction projects in the district. If you move around at all, you probably run into the construction on East Cliff. What's happening there is the replacement of a very old sewer collector pipe, which is extremely important, helps all the sewage get to the Lode Street facility there by Morin Lake. We've had a couple of leaks from it, and so it became eminently important that we replace it. And what we're doing is stacking some of our local road money from Measure D, the half-cent sales tax in 2016, on top of it. And both the sanitation district and public works are sort of able to co-fund project. And once they're done replacing the sewer collector, we are going to completely resurface the street. I've heard from some folks saying, oh, they're not putting it back right. They're only paving a little piece of it. It's still bumpy. Yes, we know that's because once the pipe work is done, the whole street will be resurfaced. Originally, it was expected to be completed in September. They got a late start again because of the rains. That's pushing it back to December. And of course, they don't want to put a new seal on the road in the middle of the rainy season. So they're going to try to get it done this year. Might end up getting pushed into spring of 2024. We actually have that resurfacing, depending on what we see this coming winter, as far as the rains. Rail trail update. You may have heard that our community got over $100 million for the next few segments of the rail trail from the state. So from the boardwalk all the way, so that's segment 8, and then segment 9 goes from the boardwalk, San Lorenzo River, to 17th Avenue. And then there's segments 10 and 11, which go all the way to State Park Drive, and then segment 12, which goes through Aptos Village over to Rio Del Mar. We didn't get any funding specifically for segment 12 yet. Our fingers are crossed, but the other segments we got over $100 million for. The city reviewed the environmental impact report for segments 8 and 9. That's the boardwalk to 17th Avenue. And the Regional Transportation Commission will be reviewing it in basically 2 weeks from now, Thursday, May 4th. Highlighting it for you because this segment of the rail trail, if we put both options to put the trail next to the tracks and on top of the tracks are being studied. If we put the trail next to the tracks, it requires removal of 400 trees just in this segment 9. And to put that into context, I'm sure some of you noticed the trees that came down over here on the highway. That was 73 trees. So 400 is a lot. And that's just this segment. It would be more in the other segments. What trees are they? Well, you have an example right here in this photo. Pretty much all these Monterey cypress next to the cannery, Beckmans, etc., would need to come down because the trail there, if it was next to the tracks, would basically be placed mid-hillsides. So it'd be a retaining wall from the tracks up, and then it would go over to the trail, and then another retaining wall up again. So there'd basically be no space left for the roots of those trees. So yes, those would be some of the 400. Of course, whatever the RTC decides, the project will next be reviewed by a number of state agencies, including the Coastal Commission, the State Water Resources Control Board, and State Fish and Wildlife. All 3 of them would have to permit the project. And it's really up in the air what they would say about it. We've certainly seen cases where the Coastal Commission has opposed transportation projects because it's in sensitive habitat areas. For example, in Monterey right now, as you know, where their bike and pedestrian trail is, that goes out towards Marina, and then they have a space, and then the railroad tracks. They proposed running, creating a new bus line, the surf line, they're calling it, between the railroad tracks and the bike trail. And the Coastal Commission has opposed that and is holding the project up. So again, who knows where it will go from here. Other things we're waiting to hear about as far as the rail trail in general. We applied for this thing called the TIRCIP, the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, both for the next phases of planning for passenger rail and the rail trail itself, the south of Aptos. Basically, to do the environmental impact report for passenger rail is another $20 million study because it involves a fair level of engineering. We have committed $3 million of our local money, and we don't really have the rest. We asked to the state, applied to the state asking for it. We'll know probably May or June whether or not they award us that planning grant. We'll also know whether or not they give money to the Pájaros station, which is on the existing Amtrak line that goes down towards Salinas Valley. And of course, would probably be the main station where our line would branch off. The big question is the state going to fund more rail? If they do, will it be in the urban areas, or will they consider, suburban, less dense areas like ours? So both of those awards will give us some sense of where things are going. Like I said, segment 12, the Aptos Village section, there'll be a virtual open house May 2nd and a public hearing May 4th. So around the same time as that vote by the RTC on the segments 8 and 9. And we don't expect the environmental impact report for segments 10 and 11 until October. One way or another, there's construction on this project. Even this segment here by Seabright would not start any sooner than fall of 2024. Probably more like 25, likely. All right, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about housing. I'm sure many of you guys have at least heard that there's a lot of housing being planned for downtown Santa Cruz. And there is also housing being in the early stages of planning for the county. So every 8 years, the state gives us what's called a regional housing needs assessment number, which is the number of units we need to put on our zoning map in order for them to potentially be built over the coming years. So we're just finishing up the 5th cycle of RHNA and begin this year, and we'll begin the 6th cycle next year. So our 5th cycle number was 1,314 units planned. We built 79% of those so far, 1,042 units. The 6th cycle, the state has asked us to build a lot more, 4,634 units. So 350% increase. You can see down here, this is from the 5th cycle, the numbers of each one of those units that we've built, each type of unit. The state does ask us to break it into tiers, so of different types of housing to be built, from very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. Not surprisingly, we've had a little bit more luck building the moderate housing primarily, and then actually next most, the low income housing. That's partially because we've counted a lot of accessory dwelling units as low income because they're affordable by design and they're typically smaller. And then we reached about 60% of our number for very low units, and actually only 67% for above moderate. It's important to point out that, of course, while public funding can build some of this housing, at the end of the day, the county is not a housing developer. And so we do rely on the private sector to build this housing. We are required to plan for it, but not necessarily to build it. And so even in the last cycle, the 5th cycle, 74% of the units that were built by the private sector. And so, of course, without a ton more public money, we expect similar or actually greater numbers for the 6th cycle as far as work done by the private sector. Why is this necessary? I can tell you, that we build more housing. I can tell you we're seeing certainly in every county department a real difficulty in hiring any kind of employees, whether it's public health, where we have a 30% vacancy in our behavioral health unit, to lifeguards, to planners. We have 4 very key planning positions that are vacant right now in our planning department, to even correctional officers. We have a 25% vacancy in correctional officers, which, hey, I know no one loves jails, but actually some of our most enlightened facilities, ones that provide the most educational opportunities, or Blaine Street, minimum security women's jail, are closed because we don't have enough people to staff them. So it is really crucial that we build more housing to employ all kinds of people in our community, but also public employees. So this housing element, which is the process, the housing element is a piece of our general plan, and that's where we'll incorporate these other 4,634 units the state's asking us to plan for. We'll incorporate them into that housing element and a new zoning map. So and we have to get it done by the end of this year. We have to get it into the state and get it approved. Otherwise, there's some pretty serious consequences, which called, for example, the builder's remedy, where developers can basically apply for and build whatever they want because we don't have a compliant housing element. We really don't want that to happen. We want to get it done by the end of the year. We're looking to have a draft by the middle of this year submitted to the state. So by the end of June, there's a citizen panel that was convened of folks invited from all different segments of our community. They're meeting for the next month. They started, I think, just a week or 2 ago, and are meeting, like I said, for a month to talk about their own recommendations of where to put some of this new housing. And then there'll be a public meeting in the middle of May, one in person at Aptos Village Park on May 15th. There'll be a virtual public meeting May 31st. I think those will both review some of the suggestions that came out of the citizen panel, as well as other options to consider. And then June 28th, there'll be a public meeting in Watsonville Civic Plaza. And probably between at least no later than the beginning of June, we'll have an administrative draft of the housing element that will be public. We want to have that public for at least 30 days before even submitting a draft to the state. If you want to get involved in this, you can just, there is a website, the 2023 housing element, just search Santa Cruz County Housing Element 2023, probably the easiest way to find it. And you can sign up for updates. Okay, moving along. Some of you may have heard of the proposed Kaiser facility over here off of SoCal Avenue. Actually, if you're here with me at the Sheriff's Center, just a few doors down. I don't know if the sign is still up, but we're right just down the street here a little bit. And folks have been asking me what the status of this project is. Some of you may have heard that at our last meeting, a couple meetings ago, we signed the access to care agreement at the Board of Supervisors with Kaiser, which is basically saying as they expand their presence in our community, we want to make sure that they're serving people of all income levels, including folks on Medicare and Medi-Cal. And it was an agreement that says they are committing to $4.5 million of charitable care and services every year. It's tied to a percentage of the revenues. So as they grow in our county, they'll provide more charity care. But just because we signed that does not mean that the facility is moving forward. In fact, there was an explicit part of that agreement that said there's a separation of land use issues, and that the county, by entering into this agreement, is not making any guarantee or any other assurance that Kaiser will be issued a development permit or for any other permits related to construct future facilities. So anyway, no guarantee there. And frankly, we actually don't know whether or not Kaiser is interested in moving forward the project at this point. All of their local representatives that I've talked to are not entirely certain either, sort of on hold. I will let you all know as soon as I hear anything. And the process after, if they do decide to move forward, would be that their environmental impact report, the final, would have to be published. Then the developer of the project will have to hold a community meeting and talk about their proposed traffic impact mitigation projects. There would have to be a planning commission meeting to actually vote on whether or not to permit the project, and then it would have to come to the Board of Supervisors. So a number of steps there, and that is as much as I know. I've also gotten some questions about what's happening with the senior center on Capitola Road. This is owned by the Live Oak School District, 2004 bond that the voters, we all passed, allowed the school district to purchase this site, and they've continued to rent it back to senior services and including Meals on Wheels ever since. They are now looking at using the site to build some teacher housing, about 50 to 70 units. That difficulty in finding and hiring new employees definitely extends to the school district as well. They've seen a lot of folks retire in recent years, and they have a fair amount of turnover because it is really hard for new teachers to find housing in our community. So they're very interested in building some teacher housing. Other communities have done this. Mountain View is a great example. And there's a few other places that we're looking at. So, of course, we're also, I think there's a desire to try to do a collaborative project there so that it can still also serve seniors on the same site. The school district is, for example, is interested in having a community kitchen for their own purposes. And so that could also work potentially for Meals on Wheels. And, some of the other spaces that the senior services need, some offices and some meeting space, I think, could be relatively flexible and ultimately in the best interest of the school district as well. So the county has no direct role in this. It's not our property. We're not directly providing any funding, but I am working to make sure that both sides continue to work collaboratively together, and then hopefully we get a project there that meets everyone's needs in the community. All right, and my last topic today is, before I open up to any questions you guys want to handle, is County Service Area 9E. This is, the reason we're talking about this is the weeds. I've heard gotten a lot of emails about why are the weeds growing in our medians? How come you guys aren't doing anything about it? What about all these tree branches? Are you going to cut them, etc.? So I'm going to dive in a little bit about County Service Area 9E, which is responsible for dealing with that, and where we could go from here. So for starters, what is a county service area? County service areas are formed by residents who wish to basically have and pay for extra services that are not necessarily provided by the local government. So for example, there are 36 private road CSAs. In this case, folks who have a private road want to make sure that all of their neighbors contribute equally. They form a CSA, and the charge for the private road shows up on everyone's tax bills, and the county kind of acts as a treasurer, accountant. The CSAs decide what projects they want to do and then let the county know, and the county distributes the funds. There's also sanitation CSAs for homes that have a common septic system. For example, there's some down in the Aptos La Selva area. Maybe our biggest CSA is CSA 48, which is really helps to fund county fire for rural parts of the county that are outside of any of the specific districts, like Central Fire District, which we're in right here, or Santa Cruz Fire Department. A large part of the county is in CSA 48. They all pay an additional assessment to fund that program and keep it going that you don't pay if you live here in the urban area. Very close parallel to CSA 9E is CSA 3, which does road median maintenance, beach access maintenance, patrol, and litter control services for the Aptos Seascape area. So CSA 9E was formed in 1991 to provide streetscape maintenance services in the former Live Oak SoCal redevelopment project area, which is everything you see here in pink. All of Live Oak, including Pleasure Point, and then north of the highway, all the way over towards, really just, I think it borders up on Cabrillo there. And basically we had one-time money provided through the state, through the redevelopment agency, to build sidewalks and put in street trees. That's great. We did it. We put in over 1,600 street trees. I don't know how many miles of sidewalk, but good number. Of course, the county said, well, thank you. We don't have the money to maintain it though. How should we do that? Let's form a CSA. So that was done, and voila, CSA 9E, and it's funded by an assessment paid by all residents and commercial properties as well in the area. This, I think, as I said, it was formed in 1991. The assessment was increased once in 1997, but has remained the same ever since. So today, single-family residence pays $3.08 every year into CSA 9E. A multifamily residence pays $1.85. Commercial lots pay $3.08, and if you have a vacant lot, you pay $1.54. Over 10,685 parcels, that comes out to $39,000 a year. So why are the weeds high? Well, the reason is the purchasing power of that $39,000 is basically been chopped in half over the last 26 years now, that the fee has remained exactly the same. This really became a problem, of course, that everyone noticed last year when Public Works took some of that money and said, hey, we actually want to take care of the sidewalks themselves, some of the uneven portions of the sidewalks, grind them down, make sure they're not a trip hazard, make sure they're safe. They took money off of the landscaping portion of our contract in CSA 9E to improve the safety of the sidewalks. Weeds grew, everyone reacted. Then we went back to get the landscaping contract back in place. It was right in the middle of inflation. I'm actually had a lot of trouble doing that. The first time we put out the bid, we couldn't get any landscaping companies actually interested in doing the work. And then I think we pieced together some shorter term contracts, but still it really helped call attention to the fact that, hey, this fee has not been increased in 26 years and we just don't have as much money as we used to. Not to mention, of course, the trees are getting bigger, causing more impact on the sidewalks, have more branches that are falling, and the sidewalks need maintenance, as I said. So the Public Works has proposed that we increase this to about $10 for a single family residence, one time per year, and $5 for multifamily residence, as well as $10 for commercial and $5 for a vacant lot. That would bring the new funding total to $117,000 a year. And if you're wondering, well, hey, we should, to hold even with how it was originally passed, should only go up to $5. Well, yes, that's true, but it is actually just doing this process of increasing the fee is time consuming. In fact, it will cost $40,000 in order to send out the ballots to everyone, do the engineering study. We really don't want to have to do this every year. So we figure if we increase it to $10, then hopefully we won't have to do it for another 10 years. And we can keep our streets looking good between now and then. So that's kind of the general process. The Board of Supervisors would have to approve an engineering report, initiate an election, mail ballots to everyone, all 10,000 parcels in the CSA 9E area. Have to have a public hearing, and then the ballots are returned. So anyone, would get a ballot in the mail if you live in the area. You could, if you send it back, we'll count all the ballots that are returned, and it's the majority of ballots returned that determine whether or not it passes or fails. So if people don't know about this, get in the mail and vote. And the only votes we get back are the folks who say, no, I don't want to increase it. It's going to fail. And believe me, this has happened with a number of other county CSAs, including one proposed CSA down in Rio Del Mar to create a new drainage system to prevent that area from flooding. It failed to pass in the fall of last year. I wonder if some folks might have wished they voted differently now that after we got through the winter. But in any case, it was a lot of effort, a lot of money, which unfortunately was wasted. We even had $5 million of matching funds coming in from the state, which we lost. So this is just a first step talking about the process. I'm interested in what you guys think. Ultimately, like I said, it's going to take some effort, not only to do the engineering report, get the ballots out there, but also an educational effort if we want to move forward with it. Yeah. And if we do pass an increased assessment, we'd be able to, I don't know how well you guys can see this, but basically get much more regular maintenance. So area 1 is the dark black lines and area 2 is the light dotted lines. So we'd be able to get maintenance every other month on the dark black lines, maintenance every 3 months on the dotted lines, as well as repair to a lot of the sidewalks, trimming on trees on a rotating basis every couple of years. So that's all I got. Happy to take questions on CSA 9E, any other things I talked about, or other things that are on your mind.
You mentioned that
And sir, just hold one moment. We have, since we have folks online as well, just speaking to the mic so they can
Okay.
hear
My question is, you mentioned that the county used some of the landscape money to work on other things.
safety for, now is that, they'll just do it automatically, and they take the money from last week and use it in other areas? And if it goes up to $10, what's to guarantee they're not gonna do that again?
So I think part of the mic might have cut out there, but the question was, it sounds like the county used the money for something other than just landscaping. Why? What was the justification? And then I would know the fee won't increase at some point again in the future. So the first question, the redevelopment project that put in the street trees also put in the sidewalks. And so CSA 9E is intended to maintain the sidewalks as well. We hadn't really had a need to do that in the first years that they were built, but we recognized the need that there were more trip hazards, that there were more issues with the sidewalks. So it wasn't so much taking money away from CSA 9E as shifting it to another sort of part of its responsibility area. And that's kind of when we realized, wait a second, we don't have enough money to cover everything that this CSA is supposed to be doing. Now, I think we have Kim Moore online, who is our Assistant Director in Public Works and manages the finances for Public Works and could speak to it. My understanding, though, and Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you can't just tie a CSA to inflation. That would probably make all our lives easier if we said, hey, inflation is 2% this year, just increase all the CSAs 2%. My understanding is that's not a legal route we can take. We have to come back to the voters every time. So will we have to increase it again in the future? Yes, inevitably, because there's inflation and this problem will happen again because there's a cost involved in just in changing it. We don't want to have to do it too often. So hopefully, if we did make this change now, it wouldn't be another 10 or even 26 years before we have to address the issue again.
So this is Kim, to answer your question.
Oh, hold on a second. Yeah. Go ahead, Kim.
We can, so the way Prop 218 works, it says, once, if you have an election and as part of that election, you say, yeah, let's do CPI increases, then you can do CPI increases each year. But until you do that or have such an election, we can't do it. So that's something we would do as part of this new election, is set it up with hopefully at least a little bit higher rates, and then allow that opportunity to increase by the CPI each year.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. It means then we wouldn't have to do another engineering report and go through the balloting process again if we choose to tie this one-time rate increase to inflation. Then
yes.
Solve the problem. Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification.
My second question was on the highway being widened. Is there the fast lane or tow lane or whatever? That's not going to happen, is it?
That is not currently in the plan. It's not within the scope of this current project. Effectively, this project will build the highway to the furthest extent, the furthest outer extent possible of the right of way. And we even had to acquire a tiny bit here and there to make it work. But it'll push the highway the furthest possible out to the edges. If we were to pursue a HOV lane or toll lane project in the future, that would go in the middle of the highway. That would probably be another, I've heard anywhere from $500 million to $1 billion project, because we'd have to redo all of the overpasses. So, you know, I'm not sure where we would get the money to do it, if we'll ever do it, but it's not in this project.
But it could happen. In other words, we're going to be paying for it and then we have to pay to use it.
Oh, there's no plan for a toll with this project.
Okay.
Yeah, or hot lanes of
Okay.
any kind.
And I think my last question is, when on the sewer, since they're turning it up and the power was going on and off all,
Which is why it would be the lines underground at the same time that they're working on the sewers.
Got it. So I think we might have cut out there. So, but for the online audience, the question is, why aren't we putting all of the power lines underground the same time that we're working on replacing the sewer collector, right? Because we've seen power go on and off so much with all these storms. Well, I think we'd certainly like to put as many power lines underground as possible. The problem is it costs, I want to say $4 million a mile to underground power lines. So not cheap. I believe all PG&E ratepayers in this area were paying into an undergrounding program that had built up a little bit of money. And then after the 2020 CZU fires, that program was mostly undergrounding lines in the urban area. Is a beautification project, particularly in the coastal areas like Portola, East Cliff, like you're talking about. However, after the CZU fire, after Paradise, we realized, hey, these rural lines are actually the real danger to our community. And so we took that money that had built up in the undergrounding fund and picked basically the 4 or 5 highest risk areas in our mountains. So in the first district here, it's going to underground a good section of the lines along SoCal San Jose Road. I think that project is still 1 or 2 years out, but they're planning for it now. And of course, PG&E has also committed to undergrounding as many lines as possible. But why aren't we doing all of them right away? It's because it's an extreme, very large expense. Sure.
Just a quick question. What kind of progress is being made? You'd mentioned the enhanced enforcement of vacation rentals, and I just thought I'd get your thoughts on where that is now.
Great question. As you know, we asked the planning department to move forward and hire a new code compliance officer related whose only job was vacation rentals, right? We have the additional funding for that thanks to the increase in transient occupancy taxes that voters approved during the last election, specifically with a little extra increase for vacation rentals. My understanding is that's going into this coming year's budget. We plan for then, I think, I have to check if we made a little bit available before the end of the fiscal year and have actually started that hiring process, or if it won't technically start till July. But yeah, basically, I think we're in the process of posting that position and hiring for it. Now, that doesn't mean that we'll be able to get someone right away. As I've said, it's challenging to hire right now. But I'll have to, figure out, I'll get back to you on this, both where we are in the hiring process. Also, if there's any internal candidates within the county already that could potentially be a fit for the position, that would make it a little faster to hire. Any other questions here in the in-person audience?
First, the one that really was interesting to me is about the housing, the 4,000 houses that are going to come into the area.
Mm-hmm.
As far as driving around in the community, just the small developments this year, say on, the road just nearby here, Rodriguez, the amount of sewer work they have to do, all of the underground, everything. It's, it's really disruptive. Obviously the roads have been just a mess this year. So I'm just curious, when you say you're going to start doing this in building into the area, are we talking primarily live oak? Number one, I'm curious your thoughts on where it's going to be, but also when the state comes in and says, Santa Cruz, you need to step it up and give us 4,000 more Is it residence? Personal residence? Is that what we're calling it?
Those are good questions. Well, it's 4,634 units. I don't know if there's a requirement around bedrooms associated with that, so I suppose that, I don't think there is. So I think, you know, this could be 4,634 studios, or it could be 4,634 3 bedrooms. The reality is, you know, probably the market will find something in between as far as what's actually in demand. As I said, for the most part, the private sector is going to have to build those, right? So I think it kind of depends what part of the county and what is needed. You know, I'd say from what I've seen, the most demand for is probably 2 bedrooms, right? The most flexible. Single person could live there and have an extra office, room for an office. You know, family could live there. With a child, 2 people could live there. So I don't know, it'll be something in between. The second question was, where will the units go? More or less. So certainly after the storms that we've seen and the CZU fire, we realize that it's probably not a good idea to overbuild in the rural area. There's also, I mean, the vulnerability of our roads, not to mention also there's the fact that the sewer system only extends so far. So Santa Cruz County actually has what's called the Urban Services Line that was drawn back in the 70s. And it says we're not, because we want to avoid sprawl, preserve agricultural land, we're not going to build, or we're going to greatly limit development outside of that urban services line. And so when we talk about where the units will go, the majority of them probably will go within the urban services line. And because the city of Santa Cruz has their own number in the 3,000s, Capitola has their own number, so that is 4,600 units. We're really talking about the unincorporated area. And if we're talking about the unincorporated urban area, that is Live Oak and Aptos, Live Oak, SoCal, Aptos. So yes, most of them will go probably here in mid-county. You know, we can add some incremental capacity with ADUs. As I said, those are a big part of even the low-income units that were built in the last cycle. And yes, there's probably a little bit more flexibility to fit some of those in the rural area. But again, you know, septic has been a big challenge, especially with the increased requirements from the state on that. But that's the whole point of the housing element, is to figure out the best locations for it. It is a public process that you can get engaged with. Well, I think even be a tool coming out that allows you, you know, basically says, well, where would you put the units? And you can practice, you know, or you can use the map to express your preferences. So, yeah. Darius? No worries. Just if you could speak into the mic so that the folks online can hear you. And then after Darius, I see we got some hands online, so we'll move to the online audience.
Yeah, my apologies for coming late, but it sounds like you're talking about the RENA numbers. I don't know if you mentioned, but we don't have to build them. We just have to zone for them. Is that correct?
That is 100% correct. And thank you for clarifying. I think I mentioned it, but there was a lot of information. So again, the county is not a housing developer. I mean, we are involved in 1 or 2 affordable housing projects, but by and large, that's not our job. Our job is to provide zoning and, you know, permitting, but we don't actually build the units. And so the state requires us to update our zoning map to allow an extra 4,634 units to be built. But at the end of the day, no, we can't, you know.
How would you, and so part of that exercise that they're going out to the public and so forth, where would you build them, getting suggestions? But then I think one of the major game changers for adding economical, affordable housing here is junior ADUs. And how can you account for junior ADUs in a RENA study or RENA result when you can't say, oh, this person with a big Victorian and empty nesters is going to put a JDU. You know, you understand?
Yeah, you're asking how we would tell the state how many junior ADUs we expect to be built.
Correct. And I would suggest one thing I think the county and the city should do is really go out and evangelize JDUs, provide incentives because A, they're easy to
Mhm.
do. It's, win for these empty nesters or whoever with these large homes. They're staying there for whatever reason, tax base at low property tax. So it's win for the homeowner. They could get the extra rent, win for affordable housing because you have probably a sub $1,500 unit separate, and of course win for Marina. But I just don't see the I just think there
Right.
should be more on the county to really get out there and explain what this concept is.
Right, so for the audience listening, a junior ADU is an accessory dwelling unit that basically is still under the same roof as the primary dwelling unit. So it's like, it has a separate entrance, it's got its own kitchen and bathroom. But, it could be either part of a remodel of an existing house, or maybe it's, already there, maybe you just close off, maybe you just lock one of the doors that used to be able to get in and you add a micro kitchen. I think that's a good point. I think as far as the communication with the state, we would just sort of have to have a rationalization for why we expect, whatever it is, 500 junior ADUs to be built. And I think if we were gonna do that, you're probably right. We would have to point to a program evangelizing them, talk maybe about the average home size, square footage. We'd have to have a rationalization. But it's a good question, and I'll certainly talk with our planning department about whether or not we can.
Just a series of workshops and maybe have like a JDU trade fair type of thing where you have contractors that come, that are there for questions to what does it take to do that. And I mean, you could get away with an induction hot plate
Yeah.
as your stove, and that's legal. And the
Yeah.
other benefit, you have a legal unit. You add a legal unit to your house in Santa Cruz, you just added at least $250,000, $300,000 to the value, because banks won't lend on illegal units. They will lend on legal units.
Yeah.
So it's just low hanging fruit. I just don't see why aren't
Well, I will
there more
say,
effort?
the other thing is right now there is an owner occupancy requirement for junior ADUs from the state. Oddly enough, so even for everything they're saying to build more housing, I recently had this conversation with our planning department, like, can't we just get rid of an owner occupancy requirement for junior ADUs? And they're saying, no, that's actually state law. So it's a conversation I'll have with our state legislators as well, because I think to really see an increase in those, we'd need to get rid of that restriction. But thank you for the suggestion. All right, let's move to the online audience. And I think Jean and Michael had their hands up first.
Hi, Manu. Thanks for this town hall. It's very informative. I want to talk about the CSAs for a moment. I have a question on that. That really helped. I went to the website and I wasn't able to learn very much. So your slideshow gave me more information. I would be real happy to vote yes and encourage other people to vote yes on that. My question is, as you know, Michael and I live in a mobile home park. It's considered multifamily. And for some, this is an assessment, but for some taxes, for instance, the library system, $49 a year, each of our homes, we have to pay that. Each of the 99 homes here pay that $49.50. We are helping the library tax system. Would it be $5 a year for each of our homes, our 99 homes, or would a mobile home park be considered commercial and they would get the $10? That's my question. And for us, $5 a year per home, that's like 50 cents a month. That would be, I know we could get people, we could probably get at least the 3,000 people who live in the mobile home parks in Santa Cruz County to vote yes on that. So that's my question to you. Do you know how we would be assessed as an individual homeowner renting a space in a commercial mobile home park?
Great question, Jean. I am going to punt it to Kim to see if she knows for sure.
Okay.
Kim, are you there?
There we go.
We hear you.
I don't know off the top of my head because it depends on kind of the structure of your mobile home park. Each of the sites own their property, so there's kind of different variations. If you want to email me at kim.moore@santacruzcounty.us, I'll get you your answer once, and if you give me a little more information about where you live, I can answer that question.
I'll do that, and then we can spread the word through our mobile home commission, county commission. We can spread that word to all of the parks when it comes time to do that. Thanks. I will email you, Kim.
Okay.
Okay. And
That's great.
and once again, Manu, thank you so much. These town halls are very helpful. Thanks.
You're welcome, Jean. Thanks for the question and thanks for your support.
Okay.
All right, moving along, David Dean.
Yes, I'd also like to thank you for holding these town halls and keeping them hybrid, because I know a lot of people have difficulty getting to in-person things in this day and age. So yes, thank you for that. I wanted to ask about the auxiliary lanes project. The worry I have is that we're going to add these lanes. They're going to be full of cars, and then the buses aren't going to be able to get ahead anywhere except those very short sections at the intersections. And I was wondering if we find that that is the case, would it be possible to make these bus only lanes at certain times of the day, or maybe even, you know, the majority of the day, so that the buses can get through? It's attractive for people to ride buses because they know that it's only going to take 45 minutes instead of 90 minutes.
Yeah.
So is that something that is possible on the horizon?
Great question, David. I do share that concern, right? I mean, I should point out that this is the first county in the whole state to do bus on shoulder. We actually have a special we have special enabling legislation that Mark Stone helped pass from the state to allow our bus to run on this shoulder like this. For the most part, Caltrans, wants that shoulder available for folks pulling off because of an accident, whether it's a fender bender or something more serious, or just because CHP is stopping them. I did ask our executive director of the Regional Transportation Commission whether or not we could switch it to a true bus on shoulder project. He felt that the project had gotten first of all, the project was so far along, would basically end it completely if we were to change it at a late stage in the game. Second of all, Measure D, the half-cent sales tax that voters passed, called specifically in the expenditure plan for the auxiliary lanes. So we had to honor that. I think what we could do in the future, we are, even though it's called bus on shoulder, we're still building a new shoulder. So I think the potential would be to make the shoulder that we build next to that auxiliary lane, potentially run the bus in that shoulder, as is done in other places in the future. That would probably be the best next step.
So we could actually have both the auxiliary lanes and bus on shoulder.
That's my
Whole
understanding.
distance.
The other thing we could look at, I will point out that we're also improving the flow of the bus on Soquel Drive. So part of those smart lights is that there'll be a transponder in each one of the buses. The lights will be able to stay green longer if a bus is coming, or turn green faster if they know a bus is waiting. So that will help. The other thing is we're looking at putting in some in-lane boarding islands for the buses, so that the bus actually doesn't need to have to worry about trying to get out of traffic and back in, and it'll just speed up flow quite significantly on Soquel Drive as well. So I think we will see some significant improvements in the short term. It will be a lot better than it has been. And yes, we are certainly looking at ways to improve it further. Next steps of the project long term.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to those Soquel Drive improvements.
Great.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you for your question. All right, and next up we got Deb Still.
Yes, thank you so much. I have a couple of questions on the housing element. And my first is you showed the 5th cycle housing element numbers. and showing that 79% had been permitted, which goes through the end of this year. Is there any consequence of not meeting the goal or getting closer to that goal?
Good question. There is not at the moment. The state has been doing some saber rattling around it in the future, but as was pointed out, at the end of the day, the county doesn't build the housing, and so we shouldn't be held responsible. I think there's a good argument we should not be held responsible for those units actually getting built. I mean, it's a factor of market conditions ultimately. There is a penalty for not having a compliant housing element. So as I mentioned, we do have to finish our housing element by the end of this year with those new units incorporated into the map. If we don't do that, the penalty would be what's called the builder's remedy, which means that folks can apply, a developer could apply for a project and it would essentially be automatically approved. So that is a pretty significant penalty. I think we're on track to make sure that doesn't happen and get a compliant housing element by the end of the year, though.
Okay, all right. So the, I don't know, 200 something that haven't been permitted would be added into the new added into the 4,634.
Not exactly. We already planned for those, right? There's already the potential on our zoning map for those 200 units to be built, even though they haven't been yet. And so the new units, basically we're going to have to make some zones denser, or, allow more housing in commercial than has been before, et cetera. So it will have to be a sort of increased capacity.
Okay, great. And then my other question is, with the new segment coming up, the next 5-year segment, and these 4,634 units, I'm assuming that they also, there has been a breakdown of those into the very low, the moderate, and the above moderate numbers of what would be required. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I don't have those numbers in this presentation, but it's effectively the same ratio as it has been in the past. It may be skewing a little bit more towards some of the low and very low income units. Roughly speaking, about half of them have to be affordable, like that low or very low.
Okay, yeah, and really, it's almost, I mean, those numbers shift so much, when you're talking about low income senior housing and qualifying for that and being low income, you're talking low income. And whereas, the very low income in this category is making up to $77,750. And if you look at our county and starting teacher salaries, all of them start well below $77,750. And that's very low income. And those, in the fifth cycle, were only 24% of the housing requirement. So, I imagine that a lot of the jobs that you're, struggling to find positions for fit into that very low or even the low income, which again, the top would be 124,000 and change. So, those are, pretty good salaries, or certainly cover a lot of positions. And we're still, only requiring less than 40% of the new housing that we want to be in those categories. And I don't know if there's any way to push for more of it to be low income, or in these low, because I don't really consider that low income per se, to be making $124,000 a year. So somehow, to make, when you're talking about affordable housing, it's fitting into what's considered the very low and low income. Right. And that's where our focus needs to be.
I hear you. I think the 124,000, that's more like the top end of the moderate income bracket. But I certainly hear your concern, right? We really need the affordable low and very low income housing. I will say that and there's basically two ways to build it, right? Either we get some kind of grant from the state or federal government, or we pass a local housing bond the way Mayor Keeley's talking about doing in the city of Santa Cruz, or use some other public money that could create some number of the units. Or, it does require somewhere between 4 and 5 market rate units to essentially offset the cost of providing a low or very low income unit. So not only do home builders know that, the state knows it too. And so I think that they might even be looking at one.
Computer died or something.
You can. Okay.
Perfect. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
my computer ran out of batteries. I think it's a little intense for it to stream. I should have plugged it in. But long story short, we might have to plan for actually even more than 4,634 units in order to ensure that the low income units get built. Also, I'd say there is a difference between what we require and what we plan for. So there's the units that we have to be able to reasonably convince the state will get built in those categories. And then there's things like, that we have a 15% affordable requirement today for new development. And so, then you're talking about, what we require or incentivize in new developments as far as what's constructed. It's a tricky balancing act, though, of course, because if we require too much, then nothing gets built. Right? If we require, for example, 50% of all new housing construction to be affordable, that could not pencil out for anyone, and then we could get, 0 units. So anyway, I certainly hear your concern. There's other things we can look at as far as like trying to create workforce specific housing as well. So yeah, there's a lot of policy options to consider there. All right. Any more questions? Darius?
Actually, I have a question, but can you hear this? Question is, any discussion of a rental registry floating around the soups? I attended a Monterey City Council meeting a couple nights ago, and that was the topic. Salinas just passed one where they're requiring a rental registry. Have you heard rumors or rumblings about a rental registry? And second, here's a suggestion. Would you consider, I'm riffing off the library bond, a $200 parcel tax special assessment? Every parcel in Santa Cruz, and I think there's like Santa Cruz County, I did a 67,000, something like that. I forgot. But folks like us homeowners who benefit from appreciation, annual appreciation, wild appreciation, and a low tax property tax via Prop 13, we're really not paying our share of taxes to really keep this economy alive in terms of providing housing for folks that are not, that have our low income jobs. And, we're an ag service economy. We have low income jobs. I would not blink at a $200 parcel tax added onto my tax bill. It's practically rounding error. If that $200 went to an affordable housing fund, and not just some nebulous fund, but this is one that would couple of possibilities. It could be used for what I call Section 8 light. Okay, Section 8 is all or nothing. If you get a voucher, you only pay 30% of your rent. Okay, I have tenants paying $17 for a 1 bedroom. Now, and they're next door to the single mom working the night shift at the gummy bear factory or whatever it's called, Santa Cruz Naturals. She doesn't get any assistance because she doesn't qualify for Section 8, or of course it's a 10-year waiting list. She doesn't need 30%, does it? She doesn't need to have somebody pay all but 30%. But I just say, how about $400 a month to supplement her rent? That's what I call Section 8 light. And it'd be administered by the county through this $200 parcel tax. And I've talked to my peeps and my other landlords, other homeowners, all of them would vote for that bond measure. There would be very little pushback. And it's kind of a no-brainer. I even spoke to Scott Weiner about it. I was talking to him about, hey, the folks that bought back in the 80s, 90s who have really, really low tax base, charge them more. And the ones that bought after 2012, charge them less. Well, he said you can't do that. It has to be the same for everybody. Okay, fine. $200. You'd raise, I think I did a calculation, about $3-4 million a year, which is, that could go a long way. And you would have the support, I think, of just about, the normal NIMBYs and curmudgeons. Consider that. I'd like to see you be the one to introduce it.
So, I mean, it certainly has I can hear the appeal of it. I think the problem is it was tried, right? A parcel. I see. So this, right, Measure H, which effectively, I mean, I can't remember exactly how much it was going to be per parcel, if it was, but I think it was in the same range of like $150 a parcel a year or something around that. So, I mean, I don't think it failed because a lack of flexibility on the funds. I think it failed because people's concern about paying more money. I could be wrong. I would have to. Okay. Well, I would have to have more conversations and see, determine what its success of passing was. But, thanks for the suggestion. Yeah. All right. Any more questions either here in person or online? Seeing none, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Again, if you want to get in touch with my office at all, I'll certainly stick around for another 10-15 minutes, and then you can email me at first.district@santacruzcounty.us. Thanks everyone. Have a good night.